Hello, this is part 2 of Create Your Own Transition for Final Cut Pro and Motion. In part 1 of this tutorial, I showed you how to create this transition using a social icon. Now in part 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to actually add some parameters so we can add some more control inside of Final Cut Pro. So in this tutorial, what I'm going to show you is how to switch from one social icon to the other, how to actually change the colors of the icon so we can change it inside of Final Cut Pro, how to control different kinds of animations. So in part 1, I showed you how to actually have it come towards the camera. In part 2, I'm going to have it show going away from the camera, and how to use the parameter to control which version you want to use. And you can always add more animations on top of this one parameter if you want, but for today, I'm just going to show you 2, and just to get you going. I'm also going to show you how to publish so you can turn off or on the flare if you do not want the flare to appear behind the social icon. I'm also going to show you how to publish different rotation parameters. So if you want no rotation or just 1, 2, or 3 different kinds of rotation, you can do that. And we're going to finish off with publishing the depth of field. In case you do not want any depth of field to occur, you can do that as well. Okay, so make sure you watch part 1 of this tutorial so you can see how to get to this point and how we created this whole entire animation with the rotation. And also I'm going to show you how to create the masks. So when you switch from one animation type to the other, the masks adjust accordingly. So the transition will work. All right, so with that, make sure you watch part 1 to get you to this point. And now let's get ready for part 2 on how to rig and publish some parameters for Final Cut Pro. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the depth of field. I can turn that on later. That's just so I can speed up my playback a little bit while I'm working here. And what I'm going to start with is I'm going to click on the zoom, which it's on it's the actual rectangle that I drew and added a ramp to it to control the animation. So right now it's starting from negative 20,000 pixels to an end value of 4,700. So it's going from far away towards the camera. And I'm also going to turn off for now the icons rotate layer or group. So we just have to focus just on this zoom animation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rename this into zoom in. So that's zooming in. So it's going to zoom into the camera. You can label it whatever you want. And now I'm going to duplicate this. Click on that. Command D. Oops, just one time. Command D. I'm going to double click here. And I'm going to name that zoom out. I will select the ramp and I will delete this ramp. And now I will just mute this zoom in just by clicking on this little checkbox. Turn it off. And I will now add a ramp parameter to that Z position. So I'm going to click on this little arrow. I'm going to add a parameter behavior, and I'm going to add a ramp. Okay, so the other one I had before is starting at 20,000. So it's starting from far away. So zoom out is going to actually zoom out from the camera. So I'm going to start a parameter of, I'm going to bring it to the positive. So it's going towards the camera. So that's about, let's say 9,000 just to make it nice and even. Okay. Oh, actually, you know what? My bad. We're going to go back to the beginning of the actual timeline. So where we want to start. So actually this number can be a lot lower. All right. So we're going to go with about 5,000 just to make it even. And you see it goes from behind the camera and it ends right there. Okay. And actually, I'm going to mute not the icons rotate, but the actual icons zoom. So it's everything, including the zoom and the flare. So we don't have that flare distracting us. All right, so now you see it ends and it stops at 0. So what I want to do is I want to bring this down into the negatives. And now this one's going to go all the way down until it starts to disappear. All right. So this is going to be negative 20,000. We also could have just made a duplicate of this zoom in and on top of that added a negate behavior. And that would have just made this negative or negated to make it opposite. But what I like to do is leave everything as customizable as possible. So in case I need to make some fine tuning, I can go in there and not have to worry about the negate behavior. So for this, I'm just going to use a basic ramp. So let's see, and I'm going to add some curvature too to kind of ease it in and ease it out at the beginning and the end. All right, so there's the zoom out. So we have the zoom out and we have the zoom in. Perfect. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to mute both of these. I can now turn on the icon zoom. I'm going to click on the original zoom that I had, which was the link which I showed you in part 1 of the tutorial. And I'm going to name this to zoom in. So that's the actual link parameter that I added in part 1 of the tutorial to that zoom in. So what I'm going to do now is first I will make this custom mix. I'm going to bring this down to 0. And this is how I turn on and off the links. So if it's 0, it's off. So you see nothing happens. No zoom occurs. And if I bring this to 1, it's on. So you can see the actual animation is occurring. So I'm going to bring this off for now to 0. And I'm going to duplicate this. Click on Command D. And I'm going to name this zoom out. Okay. So now when I duplicate it, it has the custom mixed to 0 on both. And now you see I have source object zoom in on both. I want to drag the animation rectangle to the top one. So this top one is going to be sourced at the zoom out, and the second one, the zoom in, will be sourced with the zoom in. And now we will start rigging. So first thing I want to do is go to the custom mix, click on the little arrow that's next to the plus sign, and go to add rig, create new rig, and instead of checkbox or slider, we're going to choose pop-up. So with the pop-up, it gives you multiple options and you can add as many as you want. So for this one, we're going to start with zoom in. We click on rename on this little button here called rename, and we'll rename it to zoom in. Okay. And now we'll go down to zoom out under the icon zoom. We'll go to the custom mix and we will add that to that same rig. So we'll go to add to rig, go to rig to pop up. And actually, let me, just to avoid any confusion, I'm going to rename these rigs. So I'm going to call this one animation controls. So that's what's going to hold all my rigs. And under that, the actual rig that's going to control the zoom, I'm going to name that to zoom control. All right. So now I'll make it a little easier. If I go back to zoom out, go to custom mix under that zoom out link, add rig, animation controls, add to zoom control. So if we go to zoom control under the rigs up here, I can make a new one now. Go to snapshot 2, rename, call this one zoom out. And I'll go to zoom snapshot 3 and I can now delete this by clicking on this little minus button. So now we only have is zoom in and zoom out. So if we go to zoom in, now we want to, whenever this parameter is selected, I want that zoom in custom mix on. All right, now we're starting to see something. And then if we go to zoom out, I want that zoom out on. Okay, so now we see there is a zoom out. And if I switch to zoom in, you see now it's zooming in. So that's the basis of how the rigging works. And now that we're done with this, we can just go to this little arrow next to the drop down pop-up and click on Publish. Anytime we click Publish for any of the parameters inside of Motion, that'll bring it into your, if you click on Project here and click on Project, you'll see all the published parameters. And these are the parameters that are published, and if you open up Motion, you have easy access control to these, or inside of Final Cut Pro, these are the published parameters you'll see. So now from inside of Final Cut Pro or Motion, you can control everything here without having to dive inside of the layers or make any changes. Okay, so let's do a few more before I open up Motion. So now we got the zoom out, zoom in control. And the next thing I want to do is I want to, you see it starts off, if I'm zooming out, it starts off green and then goes to green again. And at the end, it's switching to red because that's set up for the zoom in animation that we created in part 1 of this tutorial. See, red is the outgoing video. So when you do the transition, the red translates as the outgoing and green is the incoming video. So what we want to do now, let's go to zoom out, is change it so it starts off with the green and after the icon flies by, it switches to red. So in the previous tutorial, I had showed you that I added a mask, an image mask to that first transition layer, which is the green one. And instead of the image mask actually adding the mask itself, I added the group. And the cool thing about adding a group is that whatever mask I turn on or off in here will affect this mask. So I don't have to add multiple masks. I can just add one mask, and whatever I turn on or off inside of these masks, inside of this mask group, will affect this one single mask here. So to do that, I'm going to duplicate this zoom in mask. Actually, first, before we get started, we're going to click on the zoom mask, the one we created in part 1 of this tutorial. I am going to bring this down to 0, the scale to 0. And now I will duplicate this. And I will call this one zoom out mask. And now what I want to do is right when that icon covers the screen, full screen, right about there, I'm going to make sure the zoom out is selected and click on the letter I. And what that's going to do is going to change the endpoint of this mask to where this marker is. So if I click it here, it's going to change it there. So no mask is getting affected right now because I brought the scale to both of them down to 0. All right, so now we're going to do some more rigging. So we go to Properties. Let me save. I like to save constantly. And I will add the rig. I'll start with zoom mask, zoom in mask, and I'll add this rig. I'll add it to rig to animation controls, zoom controls, and I'll do the same for the zoom out. Go to scale, add to rig, animation controls, zoom control. So now inside of zoom control for the zoom out, I want to bring this up. Sorry, it's for zoom in. I want to bring in, I want to bring that down to 0. Sometimes there's a little bug if you have to toggle on and off this parameter in order to make any changes. So if you feel like you're moving things and it just keeps resetting to 0, just toggle it to another selection and toggle it back again, and that'll fix that little bug. So now for the zoom in, we want to bring this up. Let's say to 100%. There we go. So that mask is kicking in. Okay, for that one. And now we're going to go to zoom out, and we're going to bring the zoom out mask to 100% as well. So there we go. Starts off with green. Bam! Look at that. Very cool. And like I said, you can do as many animations as you want and then add as many masks as you want and just use a simple rig control to turn them on and off to correlate with your animation controls. So with only 2 animation controls, you can see I'm controlling all these different parameters. Okay, so let's keep on going. The other thing I want to do also is I want to control this flare in case I want to have a flare or not have a flare to give the user a little more control. So let's go to the flare group. I'm going to click on the scale. And some people use opacity, but I try to get to the habit of using scale as much as possible. And I'll show you why further down inside the tutorial. So go to add to rig. We're going to create a new rig. And for this one, we're going to use a checkbox because we just want to be able to toggle it on or off. So let's go to checkbox and we'll name the actual checkbox to flare on, off. And we're going to call this one global. This is where we're going to add more of the global controls. So the global controls to what houses the this flare. And now if the toggle is on, it's going to show 100. And if it's off, you want it to show to 0. So now we see if we turn this on, bam. And that's it. So now we're going to click here and click on publish. So now inside of Final Cut Pro or inside of Motion, we're going to have 2 parameters that we can control. All right. So next thing I want to do is I want to control these X, Y, and Z to turn them on or off. So we're going to go to Custom Mix. And for each one of these, I'm going to add a checkbox. So add to rig, animation controls, checkbox for the custom mix. And I'm going to bring this down to 0. And if we turn it on, it's going to be 100. So we're going to name this first checkbox to rotate X. Rotate X. And make sure to click publish. Now we're going to go to rotate Y. Click on the custom mix. Add to rig, animation controls, add new checkbox. Rotate Y, we will name that too. And same thing, we want to bring this to 0 when the checkbox is ticked off, and it's 1 when it's on. And finally Z. So we're going to go to Z. Custom mix, add to rig, animation controls, add new checkbox, rotate Z. Whoop, Z. Same thing, bring this down to 0 for when it's unticked, and we tick it on, and publish. So now we see, oops, I forgot to publish the Y. So let's publish Y. And we can also organize these inside of the inspector here. The project publish parameters inspector. We can organize it. So now, as you can see, I have all the rotations on. But if the user or the editor or you want to later change it or have a little variation, we can, turn a few on, a few off. So right there is just rotated on the Z, or you want no rotation. Just like that. So now if we go into the project again and we turn them all on, yeah, that looks kind of cool. That looks really cool. All right, so the next thing I want to do now is I want to give the option to change from different icons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this text parameter, and I'm going to, this is the Twitter one I created. I'm going to rename this to Twitter. Okay, and I'm going to go to properties, and I'm going to bring the scale, and this is the reason I want to use scale, not opacity. When you use text, you can actually make the text editable inside of Final Cut Pro. The problem is if you use opacity to control, to turn this text icon on or off, if you use the opacity, it just hides the actual text icon, but you can still, Final Cut will still see it. So it's going to cause some confusion if you have multiple text layers all at the same time. So I get into the habit of using scale, because when you use scale to 0, it won't have any interference between different text objects if you turn one off or one on. It won't cause any confusion. So especially with text, when you're going to rig, I highly recommend that you use the scale and not the opacity. Because if you use the opacity, it will cause some confusion, especially if you double click inside of Final Cut Pro, inside of the canvas. It's going to make it hard for you to choose the actual text object. So, all right, so we're going to use text. We're going to bring this down to 0. And now we're going to duplicate this. I want to call this one Facebook. Okay. And now I'm going to go into fontawesome.io and /cheat sheet. And I'm using the FontAwesome icon font to create all the icons. I really like a FontAwesome because it has a large number of icons to use. So I'm going to click on Command F and do a search for Facebook, and then choose the one I want to use. So let me use this one right here, and all I have to do is highlight the actual icon itself, copy it, Command C, go back to motion, and then having the actual text layer selected, we'll delete the last text icon and then paste the new one. So if we go to properties and we bring up the scale to 100 again, you'll see Facebook now. All right, so let's leave that off to 0. And now we want to go to Twitter. We're going to publish. We're going to add we're going to add a rig. So we're going to go to Global Controls. We're going to add to new pop-up. And we're going to call this pop-up Social Icons. All right. I'm going to name the first one to Twitter. And now we're going to go to the Facebook. Same thing, go to Scale, add to Rig, Global Controls, add to Social Icons. So now we have both Facebook and Twitter, and you can do as many as you want. So now we're going to create a new snapshot, rename it Facebook. All right, so now for Facebook, I'm going to bring up to 100. And for Twitter, I'm going to bring that up to 100. So there we go. And now we're going to delete that snapshot 3. All right. So now we can choose between Facebook and Twitter. Now we're going to go publish, double check, make sure it's coming up in my parameters inspector, and there we go. And now I'm going to bring this up to the top. Okay, so we have this, that. Now I want to control is the color. So that's what the reason I use that tint. Because using that tint and setting these icons to a gray scale color and using the tint, all I have to do is control this one parameter and not have to do any linking or any additional work. So now all I have to do is publish, straight publish, no rigging required. And we're going to call this social color, icon color. I'm going to bring this up. Oops, I have 2 things selected. I'm going to bring these both up. And now, if I select, I can change the color. Okay, and the one thing I forgot to do is I forgot to publish that flare checkbox. I did publish it. Hold on, did I miss it? Oh, here it is. Okay. And that's pretty much it. And now what I will do is go into render, turn on my depth of field because it looks nice. And now I will click on, let's change this to the blue. Actually, I also want to control my depth of field. Sometimes I don't want such strong depth of field. So what I'm going to do is go to camera, go to the depth of field amount, make this an even number so it looks pretty. And then I will click on publish. So inside of Final Cut, if you want to turn off, just bring it down to 0. If you want it to be really high, whatever you want. So let's set that to 25. And now when we click on save, and then we switch over to Final Cut, and we drag this transition over. Let's make it a little longer so we can, oops, there you go, a little longer. And now we see all these controls are inside of Facebook. I'm sorry, are inside of Final Cut Pro. We can change the color to whatever we want. We can increase the depth of field. We can change the rotations amount. Let's change that color a little bit, make it a little bit of a blue, that looks nice. We can change the animation. Let's see what else we can do. We can change the animation. We can turn on the different rotates if we want. We can turn the flare on or off. We can bring that depth of field down. And that's pretty much it. I hope this tutorial gives you a better idea how to rig in controls and how to create your own transition. And now it's just about having fun and creating your own masterpieces. And here's the one I created for the social pack that I sell on my website. And as you can tell, I have all the social icons, not all of them because the number keeps growing, but I have over 20 social icons. I also added different animations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 different animation styles. And if you don't want to do all the work, you can just simply go to my website and download the social pack. This is included in the social pack, which also has different elements for your social needs. So anyway, make sure to visit my website, add a comment below, or send me an email. Let me know what you think. Thank you for your time, and have an amazing day.